Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Many thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. We're really thrilled to be joined by Eloise Sok-Paupardin. She's occupant experience and sustainability lead for SageGlass. I'm going to let Eloise explain what she does there, but if you're listening, please subscribe, leave a review, and also visit us on the YouTube channel, Journal of Biophilic Design. Eloise, many thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Vanessa, for giving me this opportunity to have this discussion together. I'm very excited about that.
That's lovely. Can you tell us about yourself, please, and what you do and who you work for and what you do there, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Eloise Sok-Paupardin. I'm French, as you can hear it. And so I work at Saint-Gobain SageGlass. Maybe I can give you a bit of background about that company. So Saint-Gobain, it's a 350 years old French company that manufactures and distributes materials and solutions for buildings with the goal to make our buildings more sustainable and comfortable for the people. And SageGlass is the dynamic glass of Saint-Gobain. So it's a glass that can change its tint from a clear to a darker state, and inversely in response to the weather change or to the occupant's needs. So by doing so, it can control at any time the amount of natural light and heat that comes into our building. So occupants can always benefit from natural light, but without suffering from glare or overheating, which are the main risk when we design with windows. And the fantastic thing about SageGlass is that it keeps the views all the time because it remains transparent. So unlike traditional solar control solution like blinds, which when they are down, you don't see the view, you don't have enough daylight. Well, this is not the case with SageGlass. We really maintain natural light and views without creating any visual or thermal discomfort. So that's the idea.
Okay, that's great. And what do you do there, Eloise?
And so my main role is really to understand better the link between the built environment and the people, and to gather all scientific evidence that supports the benefits of a well-thought design, integrating solutions like SageGlass for the people, and to raise awareness about that, to talk about that, and share to a large audience all of this knowledge.
That's great, thanks. Obviously, the whole point of windows is to encourage natural light, and obviously, but biophilic design, we're always banging on about the importance of natural light. But in your opinion, why is natural light important for us when we're working, when we're in our homes, when we're in hospitals and education? Why is natural light really important to us?
Well, actually, natural light is important and even crucial, I would say, for many reasons that have been demonstrated in many types of studies. First of all, it's important for sleep, to sleep well, and we know how important sleep is for many aspects of health. Natural light is also important to be in a good mood. It's also important to be alert during the day, and so that we can be concentrated and perform better at work. Or if we are a student and we need to study at school, it's also important to be focused and learn better. And for the people who are sick, for instance, natural light has been shown also to improve the recovery rates and to reduce the need for medication, for instance. And even if you are in a good health in general, natural light is essential to sustain health at the long term, to boost our immune functions, our metabolic health, and so on. So there are many reasons. Myopia also, I'm thinking about that, has been linked to a lack of exposure to natural light when we are outdoors. We don't really understand the exact mechanisms, but we know that there is a strong correlation. Vitamin D production. The best way to get vitamin D is to go outside and to have a bath of sunlight. So yeah, as I said, there are many reasons, and we have observed those benefits actually for quite a long time. But what is interesting for me is that we have only started to understand the mechanisms, the physiological mechanisms behind those benefits very recently, about 20 years ago. So, yeah.
Is that recent, really? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very recent, actually. It's actually linked to the discovery of a new type of receptors within our eyes. So, you know, we at school, in our biology class, we learn about the rods and cones in our eyes, which are used for vision to see what is happening around us. But at least for myself, I've never heard about a third type of receptors. And those were actually discovered in 2004. So as I said, very recently. And those receptors have nothing to do with the vision, but they play a major role in the regulation of an internal clock that is located in our brain. And this internal clock, this is the clock which will tell our body that it's daytime and that we need to be alert and to be efficient in doing what we need to do. And this is also the clock that will tell our body that, oh, it's night very soon, so you need to prepare to calm down and rest, and so you can have a good sleep. And this clock, actually, it reacts to light through those new type of receptors that were discovered 20 years ago. So that's, for me, you know, very fascinating, and it was a revolution in the research community. It really helped to understand all the empirical benefits of daylight.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So that's obviously, is that linked then to circadian rhythms, what we call circadian rhythms?
Yes, exactly. Actually, this master clock that I've talked about controls all the circadian rhythm within our body. So those rhythms are cycles of about 24 hours that are followed by many functions of our body. So probably the most known circadian rhythm is the sleep-wake cycle. But you have others like the production cycle of some hormones, cortisol, melatonin. Our core body temperature also follows a circadian rhythm. Yeah, and actually those rhythms, they are controlled by this master clock. Mm-hmm. And what I didn't mention previously is that this master clock needs to be reset every day to the solar time so that it can then send a signal to our circadian rhythm and make sure that they are well synchronized over time. And the main way to reset our internal clock is by being exposed to daylight during the daytime and to darkness during the daytime, which are the conditions to which we evolved for the majority of humankind history when we were living outdoors. Mm-hmm. So that's quite logical that we need that, you know, even in our modern society. Mm-hmm. And actually, if we fail to synchronize all the circadian rhythm, it can have very serious consequences. Mm-hmm. We can suffer from diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, depression, cancers, and so on and so on. And maybe the most extreme example of this kind of issues is people that do shift work. Wow. Because they need to work during the night and they cannot be exposed anymore to daylight during the daytime. At the end, they will suffer from this kind of disease. But we can already feel this kind of symptoms when we are traveling and we suffer from jet lag. It can happen. Genetically, some people also can have some circadian rhythm misalignment problems. But more recently, because we spend the majority of our time indoors, and because during the evening and the nighttime we can still be exposed to light due to artificial lighting, we suffer from what we call social jet lag.
Okay.
Yes, with the symptoms that I've described on sleep, obesity, diabetes, and so on and so on. So
yeah, you don't think that as because we think about like the mental well-being a lot, but actually there's this, like you just listed off these physical ailments that affect us. If we don't give ourselves a proper what we body clock, or you say master clock, if we don't subscribe to that, if we don't allow ourselves to have access to natural light, or we shut ourselves off from it, or we put artificial light on all the time, so we're constantly on, I suppose, is it? I suppose that's
exactly.
the thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Obviously with SageGlass, you've got a solution which we're going to talk about shortly. But with windows, obviously, we've got natural light coming in, but that also affords us to have views out. If we're designing buildings, and then we have the luxury to be able to kind of create buildings from scratch. So architects that are listening, they obviously know the benefits of natural light. Sometimes it's not always an option, but if we have an option to design with as much natural light as possible, the views that we have is really important to us as well. Do you have any opinion, or do you have any views on that?
Yes. Well, actually, views for now hasn't been the topic of as many research studies as daylight. However, we start to understand very interesting things about the views and the benefits that they can provide. And I guess that most studies looking at the effects of views were focused on natural views, views to nature.
Yeah.
And actually, there are two theories that I can speak about that were developed in the field of environmental psychology that helps to support the benefits of views to nature. So first is the attention restoration theory. And it states that viewing nature can help to restore our attentional capacities, because natural scenes, they may contain some specific features that call on a type of attention, an effortless type of attention, so that our key attentional resource, those resources that we need to focus on a specific task during a quite long period of time, while inhibiting any external or internal distractions. This key attentional resource that we need to solve a problem, to carry on plans, to make decisions, and so on. This kind of attention, we don't need that when we look at a natural scenes. So in the meantime, it can replenish itself, because actually this key attentional resource, it's subject to fatigue. Over some time, if you overwork it, your brain is in burnout situation, and viewing nature has been shown to help to restore this kind of attentional capacity.
Yeah.
So that's one theory. Another theory is the stress restoration theory, and it states that viewing nature helps to favor positive emotions, like feelings of calm, interest, pleasure, and in this way we could cope better with stress. And the main pathway identified for that actually may rely in the evolution of the humankind, because once again, for the majority of our history, we have evolved outdoors. Well, even today in our modern society, we are said to have kept preferences towards natural environments, and in particular environments that contain features that in the old times have helped our ancestors to survive.
Yeah.
So those could be vegetation like trees, grass, or water, which were indicators of food, but also caves, rocks, and scenes with some visual complexity and visual depth, so that in the old times, our ancestors could watch out predators and protect themselves. Mm-hmm. And so even today, we are said to react positively towards this kind of environment. Mm-hmm. So that's another theory focused on the views to nature. Mm-hmm. But having said that, more broadly, views in general can bring other many benefits on mental health and on physiological health. And one reason is, we talked about daylight previously and the circadian rhythm and so on. And interestingly, very often in studies, daylight and views, they are addressed separately. Some studies look at the effects of daylight, and other studies look at the effect of views, and there are some benefits observed. But actually, some of those benefits may be confounded, meaning that daylight and views would actually be two sides of the same coin, mm-hmm. in the sense that the views and what we are able to see through the views also influence the amount of daylight that comes into our eyes. It's not when you want to do a visual task, it's okay to have some light on your desk, but from a biological point of view, what is important is really the light and the daylight that falls vertically on your eye, and so it's all the more important to have the possibility to see out through a view. And what we will see, for instance, if we are able to see the sky, which is very rich in blue light, which are, special cells are very sensitive to, it will be much more powerful to reset our biological clock and align our circadian rhythm than just, 300 lux illuminance levels on your work plane. So that's why I'm saying that daylight and views are two sides of the same coin and should be addressed as a whole, because they are so linked together. So that's an important point for me. Yeah. Psychological benefits of Windows views. I think you mentioned that at the beginning of the conversation. When we are indoors, actually, windows are our primary way to connect us with the outdoors. Mm-hmm. Maybe today we don't realize that anymore. It's taken as granted, but that's what it is. And so with Windows and Windows views, we are able to see what is happening outside. We are able to see the changes in weather along a day, the changes in seasons along the year, and that's good for our mental health. And also we are able sometimes to see the people outside and to see people doing things. So it also acts as a social bond. And we have seen during the lockdown period, during which people couldn't go out and meet with people, we have seen how Windows views became important. Actually, there was a study published by the University of Manchester in January this year, showing that during the lockdown period, people gave more importance to their Windows views because it enabled them to connect socially in another way. Yeah. So it's another key point for me, I guess. And I could quote other examples, but
yeah, as you say, it's really important to have have views out, I think, as you say, because it connects us to outside. So I've got a lovely view here. I kind of, where I sit, I've got, you know, views of cherry trees and the squirrels and the birds and the robins, and it's just nice, you know. Every now and again, I'm sitting, I do loads of computer work, and it's just nice to rest my eyes. And but you mentioned the blue, you know, that importance of having blue sky, and it's something we forget about, actually, and I've forgotten about it when you just mentioned it. I'm thinking, actually, yeah, and there is a restfulness when we look at the sky, when we look at the blue in the sky. It's like, you know, sometimes we hope, gosh, isn't it just a beautiful day? And it fills us with something, doesn't it? It just fills us with that joy and that awe, and yeah, that sense of calmness and stuff. But obviously there's something physiological that's going on as well, what you say, with those receptors in our eyes and things, that's actually giving us it's like nourishment, I suppose, isn't it, if you want to think of it like that. So but thanks very much for that, Eloise. Can we I'm intrigued. I know you've got the product just to your right. So people who are listening, please go to the YouTube channel, Journal of Biophilic Design, or go to our website, journalofbiophilicdesign.com/podcasts, and have a look, because you're going to demonstrate, show us it. So, and I'm so intrigued. So can you sort of describe what the product is, as well, obviously, because listeners will be obviously listening, but can you describe what it is, and sort of, obviously, you know, sort of how it works a little bit? Thank you.
Yes, for sure. And so I will make the demo at the same time. So I will turn a bit my camera so that you are able to see the sample that I brought there. So this is a small sample of SageGlass. Actually, it's meant to be installed on facades or skylights of buildings. And so you see here, it's in what we call it in its clear tint. So at its state, you know, it lets maximum daylight inside the buildings. But as we said, you know, sometimes too much daylight is not good either, because it can cause glare, because it can bring also too much heat inside the buildings. And so we have the ability with SageGlass to tint the full piece of glass or only part of it, in order to control this amount of daylight and heat. And so I will activate it. Actually, I will activate the upper part of the glass so that you can see the difference. And so actually, it's when you see it, it's really like standard glazing. You know, you don't see, if you don't know that it's a SageGlass, you don't see the difference. But what is interesting, and you will see it just right now, is that when it tints, well, it will remain always transparent. You will always see through, so it will always keep the view. And you don't have this effect, you know, that you have with the blinds, that once you put down the blind because you want to block the sun, or because you are too hot, well, you block your view, and you need to put on the artificial lighting. So I see that you are already seeing it tinting. Yeah. And so if I put my hand just behind, hello, or if I'm going like that, you're still able to see my face. And so we are still able to see what's happening behind the glass. So you see the difference. So the bottom part is still in the clear state, in case, you know, we still want some daylight. And here we have the sun, for instance. We just tint the upper part to block the sun, which creates some glare, but we can keep some amount of daylight in the space. Okay. So this is one of the product we have. And actually, what I cannot show you, but I can tell about you, is that we have a new product, which is called SageGlass Harmony, which features a gradient transition, meaning that instead of having this line, you know, separating the two zones, you can have, you know, a gradient transition from the darkest tint part and the clearest tint part. So from an aesthetic point of view, and I guess from a biophilic design point of view, it looks even better.
Yeah. Yeah, so it looks more natural kind of thing. It looks more like
exactly.
So, and that so this filter, or this sort of electronic, or this kind of dynamic filter that you put on there, that actually also helps reduce the heat. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, when you
Yes.
obviously we've all sat in workspaces where I gravitate to the windows. I just always do. I've always taken my desktop, even in these live work, these pop-up workspaces. I always go to the windows, and sometimes you think this is really great, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm really hot, but you don't want to lose your space. So this is actually a really good option, because you can if you can, obviously it will be activated and probably automatic, or I suppose whoever you've got control over it if you've got your own windows or whatever. So then that's great as well from the whole Biophilic human-centric design point of view, that you can create it for the people inside, or you've got control over the window next to you. But I love that, and I also love the fact that the new product that you're doing is called Harmony, because obviously it's a harmonious thing. I mean, people who might be listening who are photography people, for instance, we have like a filter that we put on things that we can drag down and then create this gradient. So it's like a lovely, beautiful gradient that you can put on to kind of like make it darker at the top or whatever, So, so I love that. I love the idea of that. So you can actually you put your own gradient on your view. I love it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much for that. So, so which, sort of, who does it help? I mean, the products that you're putting in. I mean, have you got like a sort of case study, or have you got like any examples of where you've installed it, or who, how you've helped people?
Yeah. Actually, this is a product that has been made available on the market since maybe 10 years now, starting with.
Sorry, Eloise. Sorry, there's a bit of vibration on the thing. I don't know what that is. So say again.
Is it better?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's better. Yeah, that's great.
I don't know what happened actually.
No, that's great. Sorry. Yeah, so if you could explain maybe who it's helped, and maybe a case study or something.
Yeah, sure. So in this objective to understand better the impacts of this kind of technology on the people, and to demonstrate that we meet the promise that that we tell everybody about. We have started a few years ago to put in place post-occupancy evaluations in buildings equipped with SageGlass. So we did interviews, we deployed surveys in order to collect feedbacks of the occupants about their satisfaction, about the product, and the impact on their thermal comfort, on their visual comfort, and even on their general well-being and productivity, if we are talking about some office space. And that's very interesting learning from us, of course. Maybe one example that I can give you that I have in mind are the offices of Ubisoft. So Ubisoft is big video game company. So they moved into a new office building located in Lyon, in France, that is equipped with SageGlass on the facade. And so we interviewed some of the occupants, and we deployed a survey. And the interesting thing for me is that in their old buildings, they used to work all the time with their blinds down, and so in very dark conditions. And you can think, okay, those people, they are mainly programmers, and you may have this preconceived image of the programmer that likes to be alone in the dark, in his own world, to focus on his work, and maybe that's why they lived in the dark and they draw the blinds. Okay. You can think about it. But what we realized actually after asking those people is that, well, they are not different from you and me. I mean, they like the natural light. They like to be connected to the outdoors. But if this means that they won't see anything on their screens because they work with 2 or 3 screens at the same time, or if it means that, they will have a sun patch on their head and that will create some thermal discomfort, no way. Just draw the blinds down.
Yeah.
So that was quite funny for me. And when we deployed the survey, actually, we were surprised of the high participation rate. There were about 130 people out of 150 people responding to the survey. It's high for a survey of this kind. So they really wanted to express their satisfaction, to express that it was a major change for them, because they were now able to still being connected with the others while still being able to perform what they need to do. So for us, it's the biggest award that we can have. And this is why we want to deploy more of this kind of approach, which actually is not standard in the construction industry. Usually when you design and build a building, you don't come back to see if people are happy, which is quite a pity in my sense. So we want to do more of this, to collect more feedback, to improve ourselves also. We are not perfect, we could improve. But having this kind of feedback for us is highly positive. So and makes us believe that this kind of technology has a future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really good. And it's called SageGlass for a reason, because it's intelligent, isn't it? And it's, so I mean, do you think more businesses are understanding and sort of, construction people are understanding the benefits of natural light? Is there a shift in understanding, do you think?
I think there is, even if it's slow.
Yeah.
I think, yes, there is a raise in awareness about the importance of natural light within the construction industry. I guess it's mainly driven by some labels. Maybe you've heard about LEED or BREEAM in the UK, HQ in France, and more recently the WELL standard, which is really focused on how to make buildings more healthier for the people. I guess those have helped a lot. Some entities like the World Green Building Councils, or even some other universities like Harvard or EPFL in Switzerland, have made some good job also to start disseminating all this knowledge through different reports. And we, part of the industry, also try to help, to make it possible to disseminate the knowledge. So it helps. But on the other hand, I still believe that, and in particular from the end user point of view, this topic is not sufficiently well known. Because my perception is that unless you are in a windowless room or in very dark condition, as soon as you have a window, whatever the size, whatever the position, how it's designed, it's okay. Because, once again, from a visual perspective, when you have too much light, glare, or not enough, you notice that immediately. But whether you have enough light to reset your master clock and entertain your circadian rhythm, you don't know. I mean, immediately your body doesn't tell you, hey, you need to go out and have more daylight, We will only feel the effects after some time, at the earliest, maybe a few days after, or months or even years after, when we will start to have problems with sleeping, some disorders, some disease, but it would be too late at that time, So I guess that we need to continue to raise awareness, because it should be considered as a public health issue, actually.
That's so true. Yeah, you say public health issue. Exactly. It should be on the policy. It should be on everybody's agenda, really. There's all these different elements that makes up. And I'm always banging on about healthcare, for instance. I don't know what the hospitals are quite like in France, but over here in England, they can be quite, well, I mean, obviously they're sterile for a reason, but I mean sterile in a design point of view, and they're scary places. There's no frame of reference that's soft or that understands, that we can kind of recognize. So, you know, so for instance, in an ICU unit, you could be, you know, the last thing you might have seen was your home or familiar, or you might have been outdoors even, you know, and then you wake up and there's all these sort of scary things that are around you, that there's nothing, you don't recognize anything. So having a window is proven that it really helps us kind of reconnect, and it brings our cortisol levels down, which helps us, our blood pressure drop, which means we less need medication. It means we get out of the bed quicker, which is better for an economic point of view as well. So yeah, I just really hope that, you know, all of us, we're all sort of pulling together to kind of like make a change. And I think what you're doing there with that, with the SageGlass thing, I mean, obviously, you know, I was flagged up to your product through the Saint-Gobain people like Andrea and Paige that I know. And I think it's really lovely. So, you know, thank you for taking the time to explain that there's this, you know, this option that people can install and use. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Eloise?
Yeah, maybe one thing, we talked a lot about natural light, we talked about the views, but I guess it's important to remind that it's not the only aspect to look at when we design and refurbish our buildings. We still need to look about all the aspects of comfort, of well-being and health of the people. For instance, we talk a bit about heat, you know, because when you design with light, you also need to consider the heat, and the overheating in particular can have also serious consequences on the health, on the performance. And you know, with the climate change, we are facing more and more heat waves, and we know that it can cause deaths if we are not able to find solutions to cope with that. Mm-hmm. For performance, for learning, we know that an increase in temperature is related to a lack of performance. There are studies showing that. So it's also important to be able to control that. And then you have acoustics that I'm sure you know a lot about air quality, which people have focused again since the COVID crisis. And beyond that, of course, there is the environmental issue. Okay, it's good to focus on the comfort of people, but not at the price of the planet, not at the price of the environment. So it's a very complex equation that I think we need to keep in mind, and just not to focus on one aspect, but take the whole. And I think we have solutions to deal with that today, which is a good thing. But yeah, let's not forget about that.
I think what you just said there about designing, you know, but, you know, design great stuff, but actually not at the cost, not at the price of the planet, you said. I think that's a really key takeaway. My final question, Eloise, and as I said to you before we started recording, I will be coming to Paris to film something that you're doing, maybe with the next Harmonious, you know, the Harmony glass. I think that's got SageGlass Harmony rather. That would be really nice. So when we can move, I'll be on the Eurostar, and I'll be waiting outside your office with a camera. So
I will wait for you.
Thank you. Yeah, the final question, which regular listeners of the podcast knows, if you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
Wow. Well, actually, you know, we live in a more and more urbanized world. I read that by 2050 it will be 70% of the population living in cities, which is huge, and our cities are getting denser and denser. We continue to build, like for instance, here I'm in an office in La Défense, so it's the business district of Paris. And there are already a lot of skyscrapers, actually, but every year there are more. There are new ones that are being built, and I like, how can that happen? You know, and
Yeah.
of course that has an impact on the landscape, on the soil, on the biodiversity, but also on our views, what we can see from windows, and on the quantity of daylight. It kind of, remove our right to light,
Yeah.
and I'm saying that because also I'm thinking about a very recent example. So I live in an apartment, which has 4 floors. And one of my neighbor and her daughters came to visit us, and they live at the 1st floor, and while I live on the 4th floor. And once the daughter came in my apartment, the first remark that they said, they were saying, "Hey, mommy, come look, we can see the sky from the windows." I was like, wow.
Oh,
Yeah. I was almost shocked, I was like, okay, that's the first remark that they told to their mommy, they can see the sky. Because actually I realized that from the 1st floor, because there is actually a building in front of my apartment, it blocks part of the sky and part of the daylight. And I realized that this was so important. I even forgot about that, in my own house. So if I have some magic brush of Biophilia, probably I would remove, some of buildings. I will replace that with, I don't know, more trees, a lake, so that everyone can have this chance to have a view to the sky, to the landscape, to have the daylight. For me, it's precious, and I tend to forget about that, and I guess that people tend to forget about that also. But I mean, it's so a source of joy for anyone, even if we work, if we are working from home or from the office or in a school, everywhere, I guess.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.